Yo, what's good, Adam? Man, I missed the show yesterday, and from what I had seen, over 1,000 people tuned in to learn about some memes. Mr. Coco, quite wild, man. How was that show yesterday?
It's great, man. It was awesome. Actually, I learned a lot about, just the idea of like what he did with that 10 million. Like I was unsure, like, did he put half in to the liquidity pool and then keep the other half for himself? Like that was a question that I think a lot of people had. And he answered it like, dude, he literally put the entire thing in, like took zero for himself. I think that was incredible to learn about. Like he was literally on vacation with his wife and did this whole thing, took all that risk. Imagine that risk, bro, taking $10 million, all the things that can go wrong. I mean, it can literally ruin your career. It could put your, entire like security at risk. I mean, you could go to jail if you screw that thing up. And he did it. And, it's just great to hear the story behind it and what it all meant. Because frankly, I didn't understand the full technicalities of it, but yeah, he's incredible, man. It's incredible that he took that kind of like epic risk to do it. But he did it successfully, and yeah, it's just great to hear the story.
Pre-sales, post-sales, public sales, private sales, TGEs, ICOs, IDOs, IEOs, dude. It's the distribution in the space is absolutely incredible. It's always something new every single year.
Well, bro, I mean, we are hitting, and this is why this is a great chat today. I'm excited to learn about something new, but we are fully, this is the cycle of just multi-chain. I mean, this is like, it is almost impossible to keep up. We're getting bombarded. The L2s are, crazy. Who put $62 million in fucking Lunchables? Like, what the fuck? Dude, how does that happen? And I don't even know what it is. And there's $62 million there. I mean, it's impossible to keep up. But trying to find these cutting edge opportunities is like, dude, this is what I'm psyched to learn about, man. And awesome to speak to Patches today about this.
Yeah. So Patches and I actually, first we got to meet in Denver at Denver. And then we talked about Hashinals for, I don't know, Patches, what was that? Like maybe an hour and a half. We reconnected multiple times throughout the night to reinvigorate the conversation, because most people there just wanted to talk about aping ordinals and buying their monkeys. But here we're like, yeah, we're trying to have a grown man conversation over here.
Well, I don't know. There was a giant whiteboard next to us, so I felt like it made sense. Yeah, no, that was a really great conversation. Awesome meeting everyone in person, especially. I came to that party to talk to you, so that was the highlight. It's great to find other cross-chain maxis in ordinals, and then just talk about the logistics. And I don't know if there's too many people more knowledgeable than you and your team about cross-chain bridging and everything, especially with digital assets. So it was awesome conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and we share the same vision. We've been talking about multi-chain, specifically ordinals, taking ordinals multi-chain, literally since almost probably a year now, since you joined the ordinals community, and we've been, helping do the same thing for such a long time. We share a very similar vision, maybe a little bit different of how it's executed, because as of now, there's really no standard way to move assets across chains, right? There's bridges, there's wraps, and then you have this thing called Emblem Vault, which is really kind of its own unique interoperability protocol. But also, Hedera and Hashinals kind of offers a unique kind of cross-chain compatibility as well. But before we do dive into that, can you just tell us a little bit about what Hedera is and what the hell is a hash graph?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. So Hedera is a L1 that kind of approached computer consensus a different method. The person who created the hash graph is Dr. Lehman Baird, who is co-CEO of Swells Labs and created Hedera. He is a mathematician, and he was working on a problem of how do you get computers to get to consensus as fast as possible. And this was sort of, different than blockchain. The purpose wasn't to, hey, this is blockchain, how do you improve it? He was a mathematician and wanted to solve a math problem, which is really silly, but that's just how us nerds go. If you have an issue in front of you, you want to figure out how it works. And he came up with Hashgraph, which uses, it's a DAG, and its algorithm is called Gossip About Gossip. But essentially, so a block and a blockchain, you have to figure out the state, understand the state changes, do all of this processing of making sure that all the state changes are valid, pass it off to all these blocks. They all process the block. You have 13 confirmations. You're like, okay, I feel confident enough that this is right. And then you have, finality after a certain amount of block time, depending on the blockchain. A hash graph is completely different. It's every event gets its own consensus timestamp down to the nanosecond. And so when you have an event, say there's, you send an event to the first consensus node. That consensus node will send it to 2. Those 2 will send it to 4. And by a factor of 3, all of the consensus nodes will have the event at different timestamps. So then they start to virtually vote to nail it down to a nanosecond timestamp that they all agree upon. And the second they all agree upon it, they write that event to the ledger. And so without having to figure out state trees and Merkle trees and all the state change, And just taking in the event and deciding on a nanosecond, you get an immense amount of benefits. And because it's asynchronous, because these nodes are talking asynchronously, you get a lot of security implications that are much better. So there is no leader, there is no MEV. You cannot, sandwich attack because every event is calculated independently. And then it uses a very, very low amount of energy. So it's the greenest network in existence. It uses very, small carbon output. And again, because of this consensus mechanism is so quick, you get 10,000 TPS. It's throttled down from 100,000 just because the network's not hitting the mark, and why use energy on servers if you don't need it. But it can go up to 100,000 transactions per second in this form. And then there's realms and shards, which would, I'm sure people know what sharding is, but just to now allow theoretical infinite scale after we have permissionless nodes on the network.
So give me the steel man for the opposite case. Why this isn't as secure as a traditional, blockchain, proof of work blockchain.
So I can't, because
come on, man. Come on, bro. You're not that far down the Kool-Aid, man. You haven't drank that much Kool-Aid. Come on, man.
I can FUD Hedera, but I can't FUD Hedera's security from a blockchain perspective.
So you're telling me there aren't ways where I could game the system and have, I don't know, 1 million users or nodes to basically create fake transactions or something along those lines? I mean, I don't know. They're
At this moment, no, because it's Hedera is working in a 3-phase rollout approach of consensus nodes, and at this point, you would not be able to run enough nodes to attack the network.
Yeah, I think the steelman argument, at least from what I've kind of researched, is Hedera uses a federated model, so the nodes are operated by, I believe it's like 35 or 40 different
39.
entities, 39 that run the different nodes. A lot of them are kind of like Web2 tech companies. And you can't spin up a node just like as an average user. Those are voted on as part of this kind of federated model. So that's where the centralization, I guess, comes from. But you're putting but it is decentralized to a degree, right? Because there's almost 40 different people running these nodes. But an average person who's just interested in the network cannot spin up a node. But this is also kind of similar. There's issues in node distributions across things like Ethereum and Solana as well, where, I mean, for Ethereum, right, it's 32 ETH to kind of spin up a node or a delegated node. Validator, right, which prices people out. On Solana, I believe there's
it's like 120,000 or some crazy number.
I believe with Solana, I don't know, maybe Chris knows, but with Solana, I believe there's actually not that many nodes, and it's kind of centrally modeled. And that's generally kind of how a lot of these proof of stake chains work. I remember when BNB had first started, when it moved off of Ethereum, there was like 2 nodes that existed.
Right.
They're going against a different approach. But yeah, Patrick, would you like to maybe explain a little bit about the federated node network?
Yeah. There's two thoughts. One is the theory, and then the second is the trajectory. So the theory is you either have anonymity or you have decentralization, but it's very, very difficult to have both. Because if you have a completely anonymous system, you cannot guarantee that it is a decentralized system because it's anonymous. And so if you dictate things based on hash rate, but then one person has 98% of the hash rate, is that decentralized? And the answer is kind of objectively no. And so the thought process on the governing council is, if you know the entities that exist in the consensus mechanism and you guarantee that they are from all over the globe in different geolocations with different governments and different perspectives and wants from the network, you can create a truly decentralized by knowledge known governing council that has different priorities, that the collusion would be very, very difficult to happen. And the second is the trajectory. So right now, Hedera does things in a way that me as an engineer really enjoy. And I think Web3 as whole, we're very impatient people, Web3ers. So back, the last bull cycle, a lot of people were concerned that Hedera wasn't open source yet. They always said they'd be open source when it felt right. And as an engineer, I really understand wanting to keep guardrails around code to the point where you feel that it's good for people to take it forward. They said they would, and people flooded them because Hedera wouldn't open source. But eventually, Hedera is Hashgraph IP is open source now, and they just did it at a time where they felt that this is a good code base that now can be forked. And so the same thing is with governing council, where there's 3 phases of consensus nodes, and we're in phase 1, where there's just the governing council. Phase 2 is community node support, where anyone like you and I could submit and do KYC and run a consensus node after phase 2 rolls out. And then phase 3 is permissionless, where you would be able to have permissionless nodes, and that's probably when sharding and realms would exist, where you can have subnets and all of these other things. So just like how open source was a trajectory plan, and then they eventually got to open source and everyone was happy, I'm excited for us to continue the trajectory of the consensus mechanisms, where phase 2 rolls out and community can start running consensus nodes as well.
When you mentioned like KYC and stuff, was that, give us a little view into like the founders and how they were looking at this? Are they looking at this like this is going to be a blockchain that's going to get to be used by, you know, I don't know, governments and corporations to feel comfortable with, or what was their viewpoint when they launched it in this manner, which is like, again, kind of goes against the general, like, you know, I don't know, Bitcoin view of the way to launch a blockchain.
Right. It's why I think it's like such a really interesting relationship between the two. Hedera went 100% no risk tolerance. So they talked to the FEC or the SEC before launching. They've done everything in compliance. It is a US based organization, and their target demographic initially is enterprise scalability and usability. Because if Web3 is going to take over and we're going to all switch over, you must have the ability for transactions to be executed that you would expect on a Web 2. Otherwise, you're not going to get adoption because the usability doesn't exist. And so their thesis was, what if we create a chain that is built for enterprise scale, that has all the compliance mechanisms for it, but then is also decentralized and has the methods of which Web3 users want, with this added benefit of it being secure and a low risk tolerance for the government.
Gotcha.
Yeah, enterprise blockchains is an interesting market to be in. I remember when I first got in the space in 2017, there was something that was called Hyperledger, which was just a private blockchain that ended up horrifically failing. and ultimately, right, the belief was, you kind of see this as well with like Ripple doing, you know, private banking. The idea of a private blockchain in 2017 was thought to be a good idea, and then ultimately very dismissed. And now you see people like BlackRock that are saying, hey, we're choosing public blockchains. So from what I gathered from what Patches is saying is that, you know, Hedera realized, you know, private blockchains do not work, and we need a path to decentralization so that it can be a public blockchain. But to have these private companies, you know, or enterprise level kind of infrastructure, we need to begin essentially kind of like a private blockchain and then kind of scale outwards to become public. But then at the end of the day, you still need to have a large degree of scalability for enterprise level solutions, right? Like whether it's the amount of transactions that can be kind of pushed through, the different type of functionality and utility, depending on what type of enterprise companies that you're interacting with, whether it's tech or financial or some blend or something kind of outside of that realm. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good synopsis. And then it is a public blockchain today, though. So I guess the only thing is that it's always been, you know, there's mirror nodes where you can get the data off of it. So it's never been a place where the data on chain was not visible.
Correct. Yeah, just began pretty much highly centralized and has been scaling outwards, which is okay. I think the path to decentralization is where 99% of these blockchain companies are beginning. I mean, even Ordinals is still quite centralized in terms of the indexer. It was highly centralized in the beginning, right? It began with just Casey's indexer. And now you have, you know, maybe a few dozen.
Excel sheet.
Exactly.
His Excel sheet, right? And now and then over time, right, people adopted the indexer, just as with Bitcoin, people adopted the node system and whatever is pertinent to the type of, you know, distributed ledger technology that you're operating. So before we do, I have one more question before we dive into Hashinals. What type of I guess dApps or applications or products currently exist on top of Hedera that has gave it some sort of traction to where it still kind of exists today and hasn't just really faded into the ether?
Yeah, that's a good question. Last bull run we didn't really have much. We didn't have NFT marketplaces. We didn't have DeFi. It was still bare bones, and everyone was creating the pieces of infrastructure, including myself and a bunch of amazing teams. But the benefit that we have on Hedera is that the technology is so fundamentally better from a developer user experience and from a conceptual what can you build with this, that even though the bear market was brutal, we've continually grown a lot. And so the TVL chain has grown like 100 and some change percent in the last 3 months. So the main dApps on the network right now are Saucer Swap that has around 138 to 150 million total value locked on chain. We've seen a giant spike in meme coins on network. CentX is our main NFT marketplace that utilizes the Hashgraph to do things where you can buy 500 plus NFTs in one transaction and it costs 15 cents in gas. We have this really unique ability where our tokens aren't smart contracts. It's a token service, which gives users a nice security mechanism of interacting with them because it can't maliciously attack you since it's a protocol. And it does things and brings benefits that are not typical, like guaranteed royalties on NFT transfers, because it's a protocol layer, not a smart contract execution function. I'm sorry, you're asking like who's building on it. We have Dovu, which is doing really awesome stuff with the Guardian and carbon credits. So tracking carbon credits is a really big section of the usage today. A big enterprise usage is Atma.io. So they do supply chain management. And so they're tracking supply chain all around the world. And they typically do like 1,500 to 3,000 TPS on network. And they've done over, I think, like 38 billion transactions. We just passed 45 billion transactions on Hedera. And so these are like the inklings of proof of concepts of major corporate needs, like managing, you could go to the store and see your salmon and see exactly which farm that salmon was from and it's the supply chain of where it got to you all on chain publicly. And these are the things that I think people want, especially carbon credits. You can't double use a carbon credit. The exact opposite of why you would ever want a carbon credit is to greenwash. And so if you put it all on chain and you use the most carbon, it's carbon negative, but it's the least amount of energy usage on network, which is Hedera, to track this carbon credits, it just makes sense because you're not putting more carbon in the air tracking carbon, right? So that's some pretty big use cases we have.
So you're telling me the pre-sale meme coin meta does not exist on Hedera, and there's some actual things I could use in the real world, right? That has some sort of scalability.
The meme coins just send me money meta just came to Hedera like last week. It was like the first project that was like, hey, here's my wallet, send me money. I was like, we made it, fam. Like we got it. Finally, it's just send me wallet, send my wallet money. And they didn't rug, they actually built the LP. So that's always nice to see.
So let's get into Hashinals now. What is Hashinals? Like what is the point from early conversations and just kind of putting this in layman's terms? Ordinals have a few issues, right? The data is stored on chain. The ownership layer is off chain. There's a mempool that has 10 minutes or longer, so transactions can take a long time. And it's on a proof of work chain. So what is Hashinals attempting to solve that cannot be fixed on the Bitcoin layer 1 level?
Yeah. Do you mind if I just go into a little bit of history first and then hit that?
Yeah.
Go for it. Awesome. So you touched on it, but we've been talking, and I've been in the Ordinals ecosystem for over a year now, just building and learning. And I truly love Bitcoin and what it is for the Web3 and its ethos on what it is for the financial system and financial revolution. And then I really enjoyed Ordinals because it was really like, in the world I live in, it's like you must have standards, you must have governance, you must have really good understanding, make sure your code is good, and then you put it out. And Ordinals is like, I don't know, I tweeted it, now it's $1 billion asset market, right? It's the exact opposite world of which I typically live. So I was enamored by it. And shout out to Hangry, who is an artist on Hedera. He really pointed me in the direction. He's like, hey, you should check this out early on. And when I got over there, I noticed that there were some things that are gonna cause problems, like The indexers did not have any mechanisms of consensus. There were no standards that were documented anywhere. It was just like tweets. So the first thing I did is I created a Git book that consolidated all tweeted standards that were being used at the moment. And you remember, like, back when BRC20 came out, it was just like everyone was coming up with a new standard. There was like 15 new ones a day. It was crazy. So I thought that maybe could be my place in the ordinal system. And then I wrote up 3 mechanisms of consensus that could be adopted. And all of this really kind of fell flat. Like, there wasn't really any appetite. Any developer worth its weight was trying to build ecosystems and things at the time, and not consensus of, what is happening on chain. So snap to a couple months later, I didn't get too much upticks. I had a bunch of great talks with like Charlie and Cypher. But I said, okay, well, like, let's create a proof of concept if this one idea I had about using a hash graph for ordinals would work. So that's when Turtle Moon, the company I'm CEO of, created the first ordinals DAO vote. And we utilized Hedera to do it as an L2, essentially, in this situation. And it went off without a hitch. Users signed in with their Unisat wallet. They selected their Hangry ordinals because we partnered with him to do it. And they voted what was their favorite mean number, 420 or 69. And all of this took place in 30 seconds, where once they voted in 3 seconds, because it was on Hedera, we showed them their vote immutably on chain. And then at the end of it, we took all of the votes and rolled them up onto Bitcoin and pointed to it on the L2 and said, hey, this is the final vote. And if you ever wanted to look at them, here's the nanosecond timestamps of all the votes and all the accounts and all the ordinals that voted on Hedera, essentially as an L2. And then I created that as a standard. It was like BRC 1201, and then we put it out. And it proved to me that you can have an amazing user experience where the user doesn't have to change wallets, doesn't have to integrate anything else, but can gain all the benefits of a hash graph while still having everything immutably on Bitcoin. And to me, that's the marriage of the two bets. You get the best technology with the most cutting edge consensus to help facilitate digital value and artifacts on the oldest, best network that is the mother chain, right? That's where this idea spawned from. Snap 9 months later. Been working with a bunch of amazing people on Hedera. Cantor is definitely one of the main people I've been working with to build this. And we decided to do this in a way that was different than ordinals, where what if you created an inscription mechanism that instead of just sending it, you gathered around a DAO of a bunch of great developers on the network, had open standards that anyone could read and contribute to and do pull requests on for votes of the DAO to get them implemented, and have this structure of when you launch the inscriptions that you have an infrastructure that people can engage with immediately. And that is Hashinals. And we built a company, or a DAO called Hashgraph Online. And this DAO is responsible for the standard setting, and we're working on getting we have 8 members tentatively saying they're in, and we're working on the 9th. And when we launched Hashinals on March 5th, we had inscription tooling from Turtle Moon and Tierbot live. We had wallet support in Hashpack, which is the main wallet on Hedera, so you could see your Hashinals. We had market support on CentX, which is the main NFT marketplace for Hashinals, where you could buy and sell Hashinals. And we had Hashinals.com, which is an explorer, just kind of like Ord.io, where you can go and view all of the different numbers and see all of the different art and collections. And it went really well. We're about at 47,000 inscriptions right now. And the intent is, this is a proof of concept of how to, create inscriptions. So like we do inscribe onto Hedera. We're not on IPFS. So all data is on chain. And then how do we start lending these benefits of 3 to 5 second finality, pegged gas USD that's really, really cheap, like 1/100th of a penny when you do an NFT transfer. All of these benefits, how do we start to utilize this ground foundational work of consensus, of a foundation of a DAO, a foundation of standards that anyone can see and developers can use, and start to lend the benefits of a hash graph to ordinals? And I don't know if I answered your question because I kind of forgot it, but I think I got it there, and that's where we're at.
Let me ask you just the simplest question right off the bat, which is, okay, if these are stored on the Hedera blockchain, is that they're stored in the the federated nodes, however many there are 30 of them, that's who's doing the storing of the data?
So there's consensus nodes and then there's mirror nodes. And mirror nodes can be run by anyone. I was co-founder of a company, HGraph.io, just HGraph now, and we created a mirror node and we created a GraphQL. Still a company. I've moved on to a different company, but they have a mirror node and they have all of the transactions in that mirror node. So anyone who runs a mirror node would have that data set as well as the consensus nodes, depending on the data set.
That's a good question. That was a good question, Adam.
So basically, there's 3 of you guys storing it, is what you're saying. I'm joking. Yeah, this is baby steps, 40, man. Baby steps.
40 to 50 nodes would I think have the data.
Gotcha.
If I were to guess.
That's all good.
Because there's like Validation Cloud, Archaea. There's a bunch of other mirror node services.
Yep.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, this is the equivalent of wrapped ordinals, although it's a different mechanism. That's like an Emblem vault, right? People say it's wrapped ordinals. Realistically, it's vaulted ordinals. It's just using your own kind of interoperability method. Since Emblem began vaulting ordinals in February, we've got such a variety of requests from, hey, can I take my ordinals to Solana? Hey, can I take it to Blast? Hey, can I take it to XYZ chain? And we're starting to see other mechanics be created. I know Bob has been using Internet Computer ICP to do equivalent of wrapped ordinals. This is kind of the equivalent of it. Can you give us a little bit of insight on like what exactly is happening when you're quote unquote wrapping ordinals and bringing it over to the Hedera? And what is the mechanism? And what I mean by that is, what's the process on the user side? For Emblem, right, you have to send an asset into a wallet and then initiate a gas transaction to essentially trade the private keys on another chain. Just walk us through the 1, 2, 3 step process of what that's like.
Yeah, no, so that's really easy to do because it doesn't exist yet. We're working at the Hashgraph Online to create the standard for bridging, and we're talking to 3 different bridging partners, including Emblem Vault, to figure out how to execute this in technology. So we have the theory, which is sort of the Emblem Vault. I think vaulting makes the most sense. I would never want to teleburn your asset on ordinals. The entire point is that your data is on chain forever. So teleburning it onto a different network, I think, isn't what most want and isn't what we're looking to do. But a vaulting system where you would take your ordinals asset and sort of like you said, you'd put it into a wallet that only you would be able to get the keys when you return the asset on the other side. And then we'd either inscribe the ordinals data onto Hashinals, which is much, much, much cheaper. So each kilobit is 1/100th of a penny is a rough estimation. And then we have some inscription costs that are variable right now from the tooling to pay for tooling, but it's very, 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 very cheap.
Has there been any pushback from, the federated nodes and stuff? I mean, this is what we start hearing almost immediately when ordinals was released was, wait a second now, if this really caught on, you could have a gig or more per day of storage being added to the network. Has that come up, yet?
So Hedera is uniquely positioned for inscribing because we have a literal service to inscribe. It's called the Hedera Consensus Service. And its only point is to take metadata and then put it on chain. And you get a sequence number and a consensus timestamp, and it's kilobit by kilobit. So the ability to put a bunch of data on chain at 10,000 TPS exists on Hedera. And we already have 45 billion transactions on network. And so scale being built into the DNA of Hedera makes it positioned greatly for inscribing because, again, we have this simplistic service that's just like, hey, give me the metadata and I'll put it on chain for a timestamp. And then what we did, Cantor and I created HCS1 at Hashgraph Online, which helps, it just dictates how you put data on chain. So you first compress it with ZSTD, then you encode it with base64, then you chunk it into kilobytes, you put it onto the network. When you want to read it, you pull it off the network, decode it, decompress it, present to user. And this method, Cantor, actually had 3.4 gigabits of data in the second collection inscribed on Hashinals. And some of them were like 10 megs a Hashinal. And it's possible and wasn't that difficult because of the throughput and because of the method in which we're saving data on chain and retrieving it.
Interesting. So there's a few things going on here, right? There's the Hashinals. Well, first there's the inscription service, then there's Hashinals, and then there's a bridge mechanism to figure out how to actually bring ordinals over. Correct?
So there's one extra step. So what we're doing is we inscribe the data onto chain, and our protocol requires metadata, which I think is very important. And so it's not officially assigned an inscription number unless you inscribe valid metadata that fits our HIP 412 format. So this guarantees that your inscription will have metadata with it. And then we tokenize it, and we put it on the Hedera token service, which gives you an ability to, again, have safety. It's not a smart contract. And it gives you ability to put royalties on that token. The tokens put it into a collection, so it's easy to both have metadata per your inscription and to have a collection that's tied to a token ID that you can easily show and put together if you want to put it to a wallet or a marketplace to then present as a collection. And with tokenizing the inscription, you gain an insane amount of benefits, again, from HTS that I don't see any other network doing it, because the Hedera token service is quite unique. And our pitch is, inscribe on ordinals, on bells, on Doge, and then tokenize on Hashinals to gain the benefits of the token service and Hedera consensus service. And then you can always bridge back to your mother chain. We're working on that exact bridging method, and I have the concept, and we're talking to partners, but it's not finalized. But I think the main benefit is tokenize your inscriptions on Hedera, and concisely.
It's interesting. It's part of me feels like, with Solana, like, okay, maybe we found Solana's, product market fit with meme coins, right? It feels like maybe that's happened. I mean, do you feel like this is the thing that's going to be Hedera's like real product market fit? Or do you feel like, actually, no, this is us playing around and getting awareness, but the real market fits maybe already happened? Maybe it is, supply chain economics, or maybe it's carbon credits, kind of government combined with, corporate, integration, like public-private partnerships and stuff like that. I mean, do you feel like Hedera's found its product market fit yet, or it's still kind of out there searching?
I believe that this is a part and ladders up to Hashinals are just the first step in a very long journey. We're meeting the market where it's at with needs that we can provide as Hashinals, but this is only data on chain is the future. And in that, you need a good user experience. And to me, the product market fit of Hedera is the user experience layer of Web3. Hashinals is the tokenization of inscriptions, and we're working to be at the tokenization of some inscriptions cross-chain. The real meat of what Hashinals is creating cross-chain recursion in browsing experiences where users 100% only have to interact with networks on chain. So Ord.io, to me, should 100% be inscribed. There should be not one part of Ord.io that is on a Web2 server being served from for sale. It should 100% be on chain. And it's insane to put that on Bitcoin, especially with the versioning. It's not insane to put that on Hashinals.
Gotcha.
It's not insane. It's like $1.50 and you can inscribe your Ord.io new version. And then you can point to ordinals. You can point to bells. You can point to Doge. And with cross-chain recursion, which is another standard we're building in Hashgraph Online, we believe that you should be able to browse all of the data on chain without having to access a Web2 browser, to go to a Web2 website, to interact with a Web2 action that then pushes a Web3 transaction to your Web3 wallet. It should rather be you browse 100% on-chain data. And the benefits that come with that are the ability to remove ourselves from the dragnet of ad networks and cookies and this horrible hellscape that is Web2 data mining. and bring it to on-chain data permanence cross-chain, where you regain your data sovereignty.
Well, one question with the data,
but data sovereignty.
One question with the data, and I know this is a big deal for corporations, is they don't want to share all their data, right? They want kind of data. Sure, they'll share some when it's related to maybe supply chain, but they want a whole bunch of their other data kind of hidden from view, right? So what would be the view of the way you approach that, or the way Hedera would approach that sort of question?
You can always encrypt data you put on chain. You know, you don't have to have it publicly visible. So if you need something to be encrypted, I mean, you just encrypt it like any other database, or you can always, you know, there's not one tool for 100% of the solutions, but the tool of Hedera, I believe, again, is bringing the user experience to data on chain. So if your data doesn't belong on chain, okay, but if it does, then you need a good user experience to interact with it. Like an upvote on Or.io costing 1/100th of a penny and not taking any of your data, and so you pay to interact with a network, I think makes a ton more sense than it's quote unquote free and you lose all of your privacy. But I do see that Cantor is raising his hand.
Go ahead, Cam.
Well, first off, hi everyone. I think as somebody who's intimately been developing HCS1 and HCS5 and the accompanying standards for Hashinals, that the possibilities are kind of limitless in my head. And I think Patch has already just touched on this with the encryption side of things. What we really unlock with Hedera's version of Hashinals and other HCS compatible standards in the future is the fact that we can, one, do 10,000 plus TPS per second very easily. And two, we have the ability to roll out standards that enable dynamic functionality through this feature set, like, for example, dynamic metadata, encrypted metadata, and things like that. So theoretically, let's say that one day we wanted to build out a decentralized version of GitHub where developers can commit code onto Hedera through one of these HCS standards, and then they could have the code encrypted, for example, if they wanted to be private source. And that way, enterprise companies have that decentralized version of their data on chain, and they hold all those encryption keys to decrypt it. Or let's say an even simpler example, you wanted to create an NFT whose data is initially hidden and is locked away by some sort of private key. And then let's say 2 weeks later, you want that data to be visible at some point. Within your HCS standard, you can define a smart contract with a public method that on a certain date, the private key is exposed, and then you can decrypt the data on that NFT, and you can use that same kind of philosophy for all sorts of like enterprise facing or retail facing flows.
Guys, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is the high level dev shit that the general population is like, when Dogcoin, when can we get something usable? I gotta say, like, it's just, I mean, I hear you and I understand. This is when I would say this is early, right? And I think actually that's why Patches, you're doing these kind of like inscription type stuff. It's to show use cases. Use cases are so important to like expand on what you guys are actually like really building and show how it's used behind the scenes.
Yeah, if you want, we can kick it to like, what can you do today on Hashinals? Because
let's hear it.
So Cantor and I have the first two collections because we between both of our collections, we tested a lot of cool stuff. So here's some cool shit you can do on Hashinals you cannot do anywhere else. HIP 412 allows you to have multiple files in every Hashinal. So Hcraft Punks has been here since the beginning of NFTs on Hedera, and we were in the first auction, and we've created the first open source mass minting tools, yada, yada, yada. We created 200 punks from inscription 3 to 202. Some of the punks have 3 files attached. One is the main punk, the other is a GIF of that punk animated, and then the third is actually a music file. This was a collaboration between Vicente, who's a great, runs for CZ, Hangry, who got us into ordinals in the first place, and Renly, who's the artist of Hcraft Punks. But in one inscription, the user gets 3 different files in different media formats, and it's transacted again in this token that is very, very secure and safe because it's not a smart contract. And then Cantor went over here and like a beast put 3.4 gigs of data on it and had giant files, some that over 10 megs per inscription. And so between both of our collections, we really are trying to demonstrate the power that is Hashinals, where if you bridge to Hedera, you don't just like, oh, okay, cool, it's fast and cheap. You get metadata guaranteed tied to your Hashinal so that when people look at it, they have that metadata. You get royalties on execution when you do NFT transfers working today on CentX. And CentX even has a reward program that when you transact on it, you get a coin that's currently around like $1.50. So you actually get paid to transact on CentX. There's incentive there. And then you get the benefit of speed, cost, consensus, inscriptions, metadata. Where's the data point here?
Free airdrops, bro. Do we get free airdrops? Is there anything Hedera doesn't fucking do, bro? This is like
not really.
Not really.
But the point is like take your ordinals Bitcoin piece of data, and we're working on the bridging mechanism. It does not exist today. But what if you can take your ordinal and get all of these benefits? And what if you can take your doginal and get all these benefits and then go home to your Emblem chain? That's the sale. And today you can buy a punk on CentX and it's a Hashinal. You can see it in your wallet. You can do a P2P transfer, secure trade for any amount. You don't even have to go to a marketplace because the way the protocol works allows P2P transactions to be very secure and safe. There's just so many benefits that it brings. And that's really what we're trying to do is say, we love ordinals and we want to bring some user experience to them while you still have your data permanence and your data artifacts on chain.
One question, and this isn't a huge deal, but the idea of royalties where you say it's enforceable on basically on the chain level. How's that possible when I could do P2P transactions? How do you
Because when the protocol of an NFT changes from wallet to wallet, it only goes through if the royalties are also executed. So if there's a 10% royalty on chain and I send you an NFT for 100 HBAR, 10% from the chain when it transacts will go to the royalty wallet as defined on the token.
Gotcha. But you can't prevent me. So for example, I send my NFT to Jake, and then
you can't do that if it's a punk, because we have something called a fallback fee. And a fallback fee restricts you from just sending an NFT to another wallet without paying some sort of money to the royalty wallet.
Gotcha.
That's optional. And so Cantor doesn't have the fallback fee. So you could send money to Jake, and Jake could send money to you, and Jake could also not send money to you, and you just got bumped. Gotcha. So you can circumvent royalties that way, but it's with a high risk factor. And so far we've seen on Hedera in the last 3 years, the high risk factor, people get wrecked and we don't help them because it's like, hey man, there's a way to do this. And most people just stay inside, like 98% of transactions are inside the royalty realm of transactions.
Yeah, that makes sense. That system is, we've talked about these sort of systems before, and I get it. Yep.
I'm going to go back a little bit to the tokenized web idea, because this is actually what Patches and I talked about for, I think, the majority of our conversation. This idea of putting the entire web on, or putting the entire internet on a blockchain. I think this is what a lot of people in the ordinal space talk about, that they want to put all websites and everything on Bitcoin. They talk about doing this on BSV and a bunch of different chains. Obviously, with proof of work chains, it's a little bit more difficult because the TPS isn't efficient to tokenizing a web that's going to be doing, hundreds of thousands of transactions per second or clicks. But Brave attempted to do this, actually. Brave browser back in 2017, that was their initial vision, was to have a tokenized web. Ultimately, they failed pretty horrifically as well. They did use BAT, which was kind of interesting for tokenizing attention. But here, what Patches is saying, or at least their initial vision, is using Ord.io as an example again. Leonidas says, right, that they don't display any assets that are not inscribed on chain, right? So you have 100% data on chain there, but Ord.io, the website itself, is not on chain, right? That is off chain, that is hosted in AWS, that is hosted in whatever cloud service that they're doing. And then the domain is not also tokenized or on some sort of web. So what Patches is saying here is with Hedera, you could do that. You could put the website on Hedera in some capacity. You could do the website with their distributed, domain system. And essentially what you would be doing then, if you could put all the websites in the entire internet on Hedera, is then you use Hashinals to tokenize the assets to bring it to this kind of tokenized web, which I find to be quite kind of interesting. You're going to have to come up with a lot of incentive mechanisms to bring Doginals, to bring Ordinals, to bring monkey pictures and meme coins and all these things to tokenize it there. But this idea of like a completely 100%, on-chain web or internet experience is something that, it sounds quite crazy to do and accomplish. And it's going to take decades to probably actually and sufficiently optimize for that. But, it sounds crazy enough that it might just work. And these are kind of like the very early stages as he's talking about building the bridge, building the Hashinals, building the inscription service, building XYZ things that can be done on Hedera. There's probably a few other chains that you could attempt to do this, but because they're a hash graph, which is a distributed like ledger technology, but not essentially a blockchain or blockchain-like, it's an alternative route. And I believe IOTA was another DLT or hash graph technology. But these kind of conversations are really important because as we see today, privacy is definitely just plummeting horrifically, and censorship is on the rise. And to have something completely on chain really prevents users from being censored and allows all this type of self-sovereign type features that allows a user to really just browse any part of the internet that they want. Go ahead, I can't see the rest of the name.
Cantor cuts. Yeah, I just wanted to point out one nuance. So with putting the internet on the hash graph, so we actually kind of solved two problems at Hashgraph Online as part of the standards. We have HCS1, which is the standard that describes how you put data on chain at 10,000 plus TPS by using the standard with the O and N fields. And then we have HCS5, which is the standard that describes the standard way to actually tokenize the data that you've put on chain. So technically, you can build a whole website, add CSS, JavaScript, everything, put it on the Hedera consensus service, and you don't actually have to tokenize it and put it on an NFT that you can trade. And I think for a lot of cases, like building a website, you probably won't actually tokenize it, but there might be interesting cases where, let's say you develop a website and then you want to sell it to somebody as an NFT, then maybe in that case, it could be really interesting to open up markets like that, right? We've already seen markets like that on different networks when it comes to the space of domains where you buy and sell domains. So there's a small distinction there, but I think the really cool thing is, and the possibility that Patches mentioned earlier with Hedera versus other networks that have on-chain data permanence, is purely the cost. Like you can actually put up a whole website and have it work for less than $1. It's that cheap to inscribe, put all your JavaScript, all your CSS and HTML on the data as a topic ID and then browse it. And at the same time, when it comes to proof of concepts, Patches has actually already built a proof of concept browsing a website through Moonscape, I believe, where you can actually look at the HTML, the JavaScript, and everything, and you're not making any calls to an AWS, a Google, etc. At a point before we launched our Defiance, and I think Patch was even thinking about this with the punks, we're like, it'd be really cool if you can actually mint your NFT through the browser and not connect to any of these services. So that was actually an idea that we were thinking, but it felt a little bit too early, and we decided to go the typical route of going on a standard dApp. But it is something that I personally want to experiment with for maybe drop 2 or drop 3 of our Defiance collection, where a user will be able to mint from a launchpad that's been fully inscribed as an HCS1 file.
Yeah, awesome breakdown, Cantor. And I just want to say I have a hard stop in 5 minutes. And then the last thing I wanted to put in there is cross-chain recursion is the answer to a lot of this. Someone spent a lot of money putting Three.js onto Bitcoin. And there's no reason why if you create a website on the hash graph, you can't reference with ord ::/ and the inscription ID. Same with Doginals, same with bells. So it's not everything has to be on the hash graph. It makes sense for you to do things like UI on the hash graph because like Cantor said, you can inscribe an entire new UI file or compiled Next.js application, and it's only going to cost you a couple dollars. But if you need Three.js or if you have assets on other networks, the idea is that the future of all of this is all of the networks working together and all of the data on-chain permanence creates the user experience instead of Google Engine and AWS is creating the experience today. And so I think if all of the networks work together and there's this layer in front of it, which again, I believe to be the hash graph in Hedera, then you can start going much faster than 10 years, as you said, to get to this on-chain data permanent way that people browse data. And I think you can see it happen much, much faster because, again, you don't have to choose a chain to win. That's not the point. The point is working together as chains to create a user experience that is what people need and give them a benefit of the sovereignty of their own data, which they do not currently have.
It's very cool. Do I know we had a couple other people on stage. Any of you want to chat with Patches before he runs? Who do you have, Quest or Fred or Sasha?
Yeah. If not, I'll just kind of add an ending note here. Internally, the Emblem team, we talk on this exact idea that Patches was just referring to, this idea of leveraging the strength of each blockchain and finding where those compatibility areas really are. I use this example a lot just because this is the most requested thing from us is users want assets inscribed on Bitcoin and they want to trade on Solana. Well, why do they want that, right? Most people believe the permanence of Bitcoin is the best that you're going to get across any blockchain. It's going to be here forever. And the idea of on-chain data is great. Then they want to take these assets and they want to go to Solana because Solana is being optimized for trading. Of course, a handful of things, but right now it's really optimized for trading. And so they want the strengths of both of those networks. Why do users, what's another one I could use? Why are users, or why do counterparty users, right, mint counterparty tokens and then trade on Ethereum, right? It's because really this is the only place they could go right now, but it offers different types of, again, trading capabilities. It offers, metaverse functionality. The community is a little bit more on the frontier when it comes to distributing their assets through a variety of mechanisms. And so here, right, as both of us, Emblem Vault and Patches and Hedera and Hashinals, these discussions are important because it's trying to figure out what are the strengths of each ecosystem, because we both share the same vision. And then how do you make it compatible? What is the right bridging mechanism, right? What is the best inscription tool? What are the best incentives to kind of attract users to come over to Hedera, to use Emblem Vault, right, et cetera? The elimination, once you can eliminate tribalism kind of out of the ideology, I think it really opens up a really, kind of a second spectrum or second realm in terms of what you can do kind of with these blockchain technologies. This was a fun conversation. It's definitely not going to be the last one. As new things emerge, right, we'll probably have to have this conversation quite often. And we'll be sure now to include Hashinal updates on our inscription show that we do every Thursday, which is tomorrow. So Patches, any final words before you got to cut out of here?
I really appreciate the time. I love what you guys are doing at Emblem Vault. The ethos of cross-chain maximalism, I think, is the new meta and will run's meta. All the chains working together to create something. And yeah, keep your eyes and ears open. Hashinals is only at 47,000 inscriptions at this point. I think we're going to see a giant uptick, and we definitely have some ideas in the back pocket to incentivize things, especially ordinals people adopting it. Runestones come to mind. I'll just say that gives a pretty nice idea of who you could target easily. And then, just onward and upward. This is Web3. This is not, Hedera. This is not Bitcoin. This is how do we, fiat versus crypto. let's go. We're all in this together, and I'm really appreciate the time you've given us.
I always appreciate it. Cantor, any final words?
Before you disappear, Patches, as you were speaking, actually 4,000 plus Hashinals were actually inscribed. So we're officially at 51,484 inscribed Hashinals on Hedera. So I think there was a pretty big uptick in usage.
Spamming the chain, baby. Spamming the chain. Nice.
No spamming the chain over at Hedera. They want you to spam the chain.
Absolutely.
I appreciate this. Good.
They can take it.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Patches.
Yeah, thanks, Patches. Appreciate everyone for joining us. Make sure to follow the Emblem account. We host this show Tuesday through Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, covering everything: inscriptions, ordinals, doginals, UTXO, cross-chain, really just find the cutting-edge technologies and figure out how we could leverage it together. We'll be back tomorrow, again, at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. It's our weekly inscription show where we cover market conversations, market analytics, and updates to all the different inscription ecosystems and inscription-like ecosystems, counterparty, stamps, e-scriptions, etc., and find out what's new and what are the hot things to do there. Appreciate everyone for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, be safe out there.